Hello, everybody. Welcome to the latest My Own Minds interview, where we talk about all things mental health within exercise, sport, athletes, and everything to do with fitness and exercise. Today, I am here with Mike. Hi, Mike. How are you?
Oh, I'm wonderful. Thanks for having me on the show, George.
Oh, it's my pleasure. It's my pleasure. Today, we're here with Mike to talk about, I think, some kind of very thought-provoking stuff. Mike's recently, or well, when this comes out, it'll be coming out in 8 days prior to when this interview is first released, has written and has published a book called Suicidal to Superhuman, Accepting Mental Illness and Its Role in Global Sanity. Did I get that right, Mike?
Yeah,
Yeah.
you said it perfectly.
Perfect, perfect. I've just finished reading your book, and honestly, I absolutely loved it. I said just before we started this interview that it was thought-provoking and kind of made me question the way that I was thinking about things, and I actually resonated with you a lot when I was reading the book. So yeah, I really enjoyed it, and I think a lot of people will.
Yeah, I wrote it I wrote it in a way to my younger self. It was stuff that I've learned over the years that I really wish I'd known earlier, that would have maybe made my life a little bit easier earlier on, and just having a little bit more tools, give me a bit more of a head start so I didn't have to feel like I was struggling through a lot of this alone, paving my own path. So glad that you resonated with it. That's why I wrote it, for people who are like, great, new way to think or something.
Yeah, and honestly, that comes through in the book. Just reading it, you kind of get that message that you are teaching someone, like you're trying to give advice to someone like your younger self, like you say. So we kind of jumped into a bit about the book there, but can you start off like just reeling it back a little bit? Can
Oh,
you
yeah.
give us a bit of an introduction to yourself? Kind of tell us where you're from. You don't sound English to me, so yeah, kind of give us a little bit of background about where you're from, and also obviously with My Minds, we're talking all about mental health. So can you give us a bit of a brief history of your either professional or personal mental health story?
Yeah, absolutely. Uh, it basically, I think it was probably about the age of 13 or 12 or around there that I figured something's not quite right up here. I went to therapists, and I was just this really sensitive kid who was always struggling on what was going on. Like, why is life so difficult? Why do I often not even want to be here? I don't get it. And that really spiraled into an exploration that has led me, I'm in my 40s now, that's kind of stuck around the whole time, like figuring out what's going to make life worth living. So I've done a lot of different things in life professionally, but this was always um, the most important thing to me, because no matter what I did, I found like, oh, I'm happy or sad. Like, I could have a good job, I could make a lot of money, still have good days and bad days. I could be living in my car, which I've done too, because I'm like, hey, look, I'm still having good days and bad days. It's what else is going on here? What is it that's really going to be the impactful stuff that's going to make life rich? So that that really has been a obsession of mine that I just could never let go. Like, why? What is it? And that was really the impetus to all of my work. And then sharing the book was just something I couldn't not do. It was, again, at this point, like, where's the meaning? What do I have to do? And it was in sharing this book. And
Mm. And
hopefully
you
I answered your question.
No, you did, yeah. Um, you didn't actually say where you're from, just quickly.
Oh, yeah. Thank you for forgiving my shortcomings. I'm not English. I'm out in California. I was born and raised in California. And the majority of my life has been here. I spent time in Germany and Austria also. That's part of
Yeah,
my.
that's kind of what I wanted to allude to as well, is the fact that you're written in your book. You seem like you've done a lot of things and you've been to a lot of places. But I remember there was a very long list of the different things you've kind of worked in and had training in. Can you kind of reveal a few of them to us?
Yeah, absolutely. I studied psychology in college, and I did it because I thought that's where I would find answers. And I didn't. I found a lot of answers, but none that felt that they were resonated with me. None that were really mirrored my internal workings. And because of that, I didn't go on. I didn't continue to get a master's. And instead, I looked into other places, and one, some of them were like shamanism. I worked with the Lakota chief for a while, um, and Hakomi and NLP, neuro linguistic programming, if you're familiar with that. Basically, anything where anybody had anything to say regarding how we operate, I looked into and heard what they said. And I took little tidbits from all of them. I'm like, oh, this feels right to me. This is personally how I understand myself to operate. And what I started seeing was a theme in a lot of them, which is wonderful. You know, I did practice Qigong as well for a while. And to hear something in Qigong, which comes from the East, and then also something from, you know, the indigenous in the Americas, it's like, how are these the same? These cultures are so different. How are they coming up with some of these same theories and ideas? Like, there must be something deeper to that that really ties into the fundamental workings. So I'm open to anything. I think truths are hidden everywhere all the time. We just have to be able to recognize them and pick them out and then pop that into our toolbox.
I think because you can tell from the book, and I just think from the way you articulate yourself, that you've got this kind of vast knowledge from different areas. And I think it's something that I try and do myself, is I try and learn from every difference, because I'm currently a master's student. I'm just finishing up. I've got about 5 days until my final submission. Not stressed at all.
Congrats.
But
Congrats. That's a big deal.
Yeah, thank you. But so obviously we're pushed down the kind of research route and the stuff that you're done at college and at uni. But I also try and take from, you know, from books. Like, I try and read like philosophy, and you know, I try and get like words and different rules and different meanings and things from all sorts of different areas, because I think, like you say, if you experience everything and you find the links in between them all, often that's where the hidden secrets are, or where the actual golden nuggets lie.
Absolutely. Yeah. And the old saying, you know, the truth isn't a grain of sand. I don't think I'm saying it right, but you know, truth is reflected everywhere around us. And once you open stuff up, you could learn about engineering, and it's just stretching us more, and that whole holistic gestalt kind of understanding of the system. And so, yeah, I'm endlessly curious, and I love people. I talk to you too. You have that analytical mind, which I think is, you know, I'm sure not much passes you. If there's a curiosity, you're like, well, why? You know, always asking like, well, how does that work? And I do think they all tie together.
Yeah. I agree. So we'll get onto your book. So before we end up just talking about everything in life.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
So just to kind of start out, we've mentioned your book, and we've kind of spoken a little bit about it and mentioned the title and stuff. Could you give kind of your version of it, like a brief synopsis of the book?
Yeah. I'd kind of break it into 3 parts. It's definitely large part memoir, my personal experience and struggles, and a lot of things that I did to cope before I had better tools. And that kind of comes to the second part of the book, which it's large part tool book. There's a lot of very step-by-step things on how I actually started to cope and turn this difficulty into an asset, how to overcome a lot of it. And in that, there's also a lot of indicators for somebody not struggling. I think this book can be really helpful to maybe understand somebody who is. So if you have a loved one or a daughter or a parent who's struggling, you don't quite get them, I think this might give a glimpse on how they might see the world, to give a little bit of empathy. And then also, you know, the tools are applicable to anybody. Some of us just need them to survive, but, you know, they really will help anybody, even if you feel really healthy, to take it, you know, to the next level and open up some more.
Yeah, I think in regards to the kind of, you know, helping someone who doesn't necessarily have the issues but knows someone who does, I definitely get that from the book. And I think often one of the biggest downfalls that people have when they're struggling with mental health is that they can't quite articulate, or they can't articulate from themselves how to help the individual, so they can't quite find the words and how to question them or how to unlock this issue that they're having. And I think your book provides that in a lot of ways. You go in-depth analysis into the ways that you felt
Mm.
during these different, these extreme lows, and the ways that you felt during the moments when you were exploring how to find your way out. And yeah, I think that's something that people can get a lot out of this book, is it's not just if you are currently struggling. It can be, for the future you that might end up struggling, or
Mm.
for a friend or a family member who is struggling and you want to help them. And as like you say as well, I think you give tools to prevent someone hitting that, going to that level,
Mm.
or deteriorating in some manner.
Yeah, I think you hit it right on the head. I mean, being able to articulate what's going on is such a crucial first step to anything.
Mm.
And once we can do that, and sometimes we need a little bit of help. And if somebody points it out, we obviously often can't see our own blocks. So if somebody points out just a little bit, you're like, oh my God, yes, that is how I feel. Starting to learn that and make that part of the daily practice is going to be so powerful when you get up and you're like, I feel like crap today. Why do I feel so bad? And starting to get the tools of like, well, oh, I feel bad because of this. Like, I didn't even know I could say that. So building, I don't want to say building. I think a lot of people who have challenges in mental health department are really sensitive people. So it's tuning that sensitivity into back in on ourselves in a way where we can just find that little thing that's out of place.
Mm.
It's you don't throw the whole car out because one little thing's wrong. You find that little. It's like, oh, it's this $5 part, and it's kind of similar here. It's like, oh, I'm off. I feel like crap. I'm depressed or whatever. It's like, oh, it's just these couple little things that need a tweak, and articulating that is so important. Being able to hone in on that specific stuff is just the key to unlock all of that.
And I agree 100%. And I think in your book, I remember you mentioned one of your kind of tools for people to get better is journaling. I think you mentioned that, if I remember
Absolutely.
correctly.
Yeah.
And here at Maya Minds, like a big part of what we do is we share people's stories on our website. I don't know if you've seen, but we collect people's mental health stories and we share them on our website. So we have them freely. I think we have 79 unique stories from different people with their kind of issues and things that they're working through, things that they've worked through. And a big part of the reason why I try and get people to do that is because it helps you articulate. It helps you get your story on paper. It becomes physical, and you can have those epiphany moments. And then also for people reading them, they can also get those epiphany moments just from reading
Hmm.
their stories. And I think your book's just going to be like a mega version of that, where it's like not just an individual person's stories, but you take your story, but you also add in all the things you've learned and all your ideas, and give people tools from there. So yeah, I honestly think this book is going to be great for a lot of people. I think I honestly can't think of someone who wouldn't get something out of it, which sounds like you paid me to say that, but you haven't. But yeah, I do. I think this is going to be a brilliant thing for people to read.
Good. Yeah. I mean, I wrote it just because, I mean, yeah, I needed this, as I mentioned. So anybody who can resonate and help, I think we need this in the world. I don't want to
Mhm.
get again on a tangent philosophically, but I
Yeah.
really think we need to kind of step it up. And anyone that can help each other, in this network, what you're doing is great. Sharing stories, hearing there's other people out there like you, and learning from the people who have something to offer, and getting more tools so we can all really kind of step into the next phase and iteration.
Mm.
Um,
I'm kind of I feel like I'm going so off of the question, because beforehand we kind of spoke about the questions, but I'm just kind of enjoying the back and forth here. So I'm just gonna kind of go with it. As the kind of title suggests, you talk quite a lot about suicide in the book. And one thing that I found really interesting and quite refreshing, and actually so something that I kind of mimics my own mindset about this, is that you actually talk about suicidal thoughts and being in a suicidal place as actually being something that can be positive.
Mm.
And and positivity can come out of it, which I imagine for a lot of people listening sounds kind of counterintuitive and doesn't seem to make sense. Can you explain to the listeners and myself some of the kind of positives that can come out of suicidal thoughts, or like how someone can turn that into a positive thing?
Absolutely. Yeah, that's a very sensitive part. So I think before I just give a general answer, um, I'll share a little bit of my personal side about that, because I know that's a very difficult thing for some people to swallow. How could that possibly be a positive thing? Um, for me personally, and I think this ties a little bit philosophically to what I think the meaning of life and the meaning of death, and really most notably, what will happen in the transition when we die. I have a belief that I will have to face myself when I die. The first and foremost step will be having to face my real self and answer to myself. And that belief that I hold, coupled with the courage that it takes to actually, if someone were to consider suicide, I don't want to glorify it at all, but it's not, I don't think, an easy thing. It's this massive thing, even mentally, to consider that. So between those two things, for me, I got the courage to say, look, I'm going to look to face myself before I die. If I'm going to have to do this anyway, why not do this while I'm alive? And that way, when I do pass, hopefully there'll be, um, it'll make that easier, maybe more deserved, maybe even possibly pleasurable. So for me, that was a big part of it. It's like, well, let's do this now. Like get this hard stuff out of the way. And the irony is, in doing that, I found for me what was the essence of life, and that was coming to our authenticity, like getting to know ourselves as intimately as possible. So there was this really great irony. So that's the backstory of that. Is, for me personally, it really led me to discovering things that made life really wonderful and outstanding. And I mean, just like enjoyable. And on a more generalized answer, and again, there's always exceptions, but I think when most people are considering or even thinking about suicide as a possibility, what there is a part that wants to and needs to die. It's a shame if, and what happens a lot is, we identify so much with the parts that we're not happy with. We believe that's all of us. And then when that happens, we see suicide as the only way out. But the reality is, there's so much more of us. And we're just so we're so identified with these parts of us that are suffering, unhappy, not doing what we think we can do or are able to do. And because of that, it's like throwing the baby out with the bathwater. Or going back to the car analogy, it's like there's a few things wrong with the car. You're out of gas. It's like, oh my, if all you're thinking about is gas, you're pretty screwed. It's like the car's out of gas. But if you start to learn how to become your own mechanic a bit, you're like, oh, well, this is how I work. I just need this. I need to get rid of this. I'm out of gas. I got a flat tire. You fix those, the whole majority of the system is still working perfectly fine.
Mm.
So suicidal thinking, depression, these are all symptoms. There's like that check engine light that goes on. And if we start to see those as that, it's just an indicator that we need to make an adjustment somewhere.
Mm. One thing that I love about your book, because obviously you do touch on these kind of difficult subjects, and one of the things I love is right at the start you say that everything in this book is kind of your own thoughts, and you understand that it is kind of a learning process. And the way that I read it is almost like you're showing the person that you've written this for, you're showing them what you've learned and allowing them to make the decision, because it is like you're saying, we all have our own car, and we all have our own little intricacies that are wrong with it, so we all need different things. And you know, your book is kind of highlighting, you know, the possible, you know, it could be that you're out of fuel, it could be that you got a flat tire, it could be that
Mm.
your windscreen wipers snapped off, or, you know, there's all these different things that could be an issue, and here are the tools that, you know, could help you. And you know, I love that about the book, that, you know, you aren't, I think often in like these kind of books where we talk about mental health or talk about kind of, you know, ways to improve your psyche, etc. It's often quite objective, and like, this is the way, and if you don't do it this way, you're wrong. But your book doesn't feel that way, which I like.
Yeah, I mean, you know, I'm working hard to create a program right now. And the difficulty in that is that we are all different. I do completely believe there's practices, you know, and I know a lot of the audience here at Myo Minds is also in exercise. And there's a lot of analogies with that. And you can absolutely have an exercise routine that's good for pretty much everybody. But it's so important to get those fine tweaks, because, you know, if somebody's posture is a little, might hurt themselves, or if, um, uh, you know, somebody needs a little bit of focus in one area. But, you know, the little fine adjustments can really make the difference between really going to the next kind of level, really letting the stuff sink in, really seeing some profound shifts,
Mm.
and not.
Um, yeah, I agree. I think, especially within the exercise community, I think what you were talking about earlier, to do with how the authenticity and learning about yourself, and, you know, one of the ways that journaling helps is by learning about yourself. And I think, I often call it our definitions of ourself, where, a lot of gym goers define themselves as a gym goer, and
Mm,
they don't allow themselves to come out of that stereotype, because they almost feel like they're going against their group, or, you know, they're kind of betraying themselves in some kind of manner. um
yeah.
I'm interested in what your thoughts are on that kind of, you know, the idea that, you know, people tend to are afraid to be outside of what is maybe stereotypically accepted for them to be.
Yeah, I mean, that's a profound thing to notice. And it's a really interesting topic. I mean, the ability that we have as humans to categorize is so it's a double-edged sword. It's so helpful in so many ways, but then it can also be debilitating in a lot of ways. And, you know, in the book specifically, I talk about, you know, and I never ever said, I knew deep down, but I never admitted to being, you know, bipolar or having depression or any of this stuff, because in my upbringing, that was this stigma and this category that I felt people adhered to way too much, and I would never be able to break out. I'm fine saying that now, because I think part of what we need to do is start to break these categories down. We're so uh, we're so into these like group identities, like you mentioned the gym. I'm a gym goer. It's like, well, I'm a rock climber, you know, or I'm a biker. It's like, okay, great. That's all fine and good, but let's also not forget all that we share, you know, the bigger group. And, you know, in this metaphor, it'd be exercise. Like, I don't care if you're in the gym or a rock climber or martial artist. It's like we are all so interested in how our bodies work. And I think we can just let those the categories just dissolve
Mm.
and really have a discussion about that. And that goes for anything, you know, religion, politics. It's like, let's drop all this stuff that's just specific to our category, and let's talk about the stuff that supersedes all of that.
Mm.
And with exercise in the gym, and that's empowering, because then you can start to bring stuff, you know. You better believe the rock climber, the biker, the martial artist is going to have some really good stuff to offer the gym goer category in regards to how the body works. And merging that a little bit is, I think, so empowering.
Mm.
And in the mental health regard, it's like, okay, great. Okay, I have bipolar. I'm depressed. Great. Now let's talk about all the stuff that still keeps you human, that still
Mm.
makes you human. And that's going to just lower the it's going to make it that much easier to shift categories. And not that that's the goal, but it's going to make it easier to come together and just to really operate functionally without the stigma or without the bounds of that category rather.
I think once you kind of open up those categories or open up the definition of yourself, there's opening it up. It allows you freedom it's almost like taking the shackles off or taking the chains off. I don't have to, some people can, a common one within the gym is, feeling pressured that you have to train every day, or you have to do these things because otherwise, you're gonna let yourself down. If you are someone that wants to, I'm a weightlifter and I lift weights, but I also write poetry and I also like run my minds, and there's lots of different parts of me. But a big thing that I had to do when I was improving my mental health was allowing myself to be other things and not be this one solid thing that I thought would make people like me and make me make me part of this group.
Yeah, I love it. It's so empowering and it takes courage to, especially if you're really identified with the group. I did a lot of martial arts, and I remember when I first met the group I trained with, I already was wearing the same clothes. We had these like whitewashed jeans, a t-shirt, and these Adidas indoor soccer shoes, these Sambas. And I hadn't even met them. And I walked into the room and they were all wearing the same thing. And I'm like, my heart kind of jumped. I'm like, is this my people? I mean, it's really powerful to find that. And it takes a lot of courage that's one of these fundamental fears of humanity, is not being accepted, to be insignificant or to be, ousted by a group. So it takes a lot of courage to be completely with your group, completely open and honest, and also be like, hey, I write poetry.
I think you touching on your kind of the fears. I read somewhere, I can't remember who I'm quoting here, but it's that every human has two basic fears. It's one is the fear that we're not good enough, and two is the fear that no one will love us because of that.
Oh man.
I think that's perfect. Like I think I can apply that to everything and everyone.
Yeah, I think if we all woke up and really sat with those two thoughts every morning, and then went ahead with what we wanted, I think the world would be an incredible place. We all had the courage to overcome those two things.
Yeah, it's incredibly difficult, and I don't think there are very many people, if anyone, who has managed it.
Well, some that do end up being so successful. And even in my recent path this wasn't an easy thing to come out and say, but immediately people are coming in, even close family and close friends who may not have known a lot of these things. When I find the more vulnerable and open I am, the more people just are like, feel safe and are like, oh, you know what? I do too. And it's like, thank you. And it's this great irony that our biggest fear, which is often being our real selves and not being accepted for it, ends up just like making everything more palatable. Once we just do that and face it, we end up getting everything we want. It's like, wow, now I'm actually being accepted. And at least, the first step is really accepting ourselves for that. It's hard to put ourselves out halfway and judging ourselves, but
I agree. It's a terrifying prospect, but normally on the other side of that fear is something great. And even if the actual person you say it to doesn't necessarily react in the way that you wanted, although most of the time they end up doing so, or they end up just not caring enough, like as much as you thought they did. That's often my thing. Is I think I'm going to tell this person, oh, I have an eating disorder, and then they're going to be like, oh my, what, right. How? And really they just go like, oh, okay, and then we just carry on with whatever else we were talking about.
Right. Yeah. Well, I'm hungry. You want to come over?
Yeah, that's basically it. Okay, so another thing I wanted to talk about in the book is obviously we spoke about how the book kind of gives a lot of tips about turning, adapting your life and adding these different tools in. One of the things that you mentioned that I love is that often when we hit a low point, we put things in place to help. But then when these things help us to get better, we revert to what I think you called an autopilot, or we kind of go back to the ways we were. Is this something that this is something that I've noticed in myself and in other people? And is this something that you've had to deal with like personally?
I mean, all the time. I love the question. We are almost laughable as a species. It's like, and when you're able to step out from yourself and see that, like you clearly have, it's almost laughable. You're like, okay, I hit this rough point. I start doing all these practices. I feel amazing quickly. You know, a couple of weeks pass, a month, you're like, I'm on top of the world. And then next thing you know, you're back in front of the TV or whatever your things are, and you just start declining again. And it's like, why? If you can see it, why can't we change it? And I mean, it really comes down to discipline. And there's a couple levels of discipline. One is just the immediate making the work in and of itself rewarding and feel good. And that's something I've really had to work hard to cultivate. And it's part of my practice and part of my discipline is actually to create more discipline. But in a way that feels good. And again, you know, with the exercise community and working out, it's a really great metaphor. You know, you could feel like a slob, feel terrible about yourself. And those first couple of weeks going to the gym, if that's your thing, usually are going to suck. You may kind of feel good. You may feel good because you have the motivation to do that, but your body's going to hurt. You're going to be weak. And you'll start to see results, but it's kind of miserable at first if you've been out of the gym for a while. But after you do it for a bit and you have that practice, you know, the short-term benefit, the short-term reward is that it starts to feel really good. You know, you go in there and you lift weights and your muscles, your blood's pumping. The work in and of itself feels really good. And you get the benefits of the longer term. You know, you get healthier, you get that strength that you can only develop after, you know, doing something for months and years or decades even. And it's the same thing with this. So for me, you know, some of these tools, you only recognize the benefits of them when you're really in a dark place and you use them and you get out of that dark place. But when you continue to do them, like for me, and I'll use meditation as an example, that's only one tool, you know, but I do different breath work, all these things. I've made them just like working out in and of themselves feel good. And once you read what they do for you, it starts to feel that much better and doing the work gets easier. So discipline is kind of a harsh word. I kind of feel like part of the word discipline means it's only being done because of your, you know, your tenacity, not because you actually want to. But for me, discipline also kind of means like, no, it's a ritual, it's practice, and it can really be a empowering, freeing thing. I mean, for me, the essence of freedom actually lies in discipline, like this ritual. And then once you have those boundaries, then you can really shine and explore. It's this irony, you know, this yin yang, this like power of opposites, you know. If I'm not getting too far out on a
no, it's I'm glad you like the question, and I thought it was just I loved that point. There's a lot of points in your book that kind of, you know, highlighted to me, and you should see the notes that I made. I've got like a massive sheet of notes for what I was going to ask you, and I had to pick a few. But I thought this was a really important one because I think it's really, especially speaking to the exercising community, I think it's really good because the example that I immediately thought of was for my squats, I always get really tight hips. And I won't stretch at all. I won't do any mobile stuff, and then I'll get injured. My hips will get injured. So then I'll start stretching, and they'll get better, and then I'll stop doing the stretching again, and then they get worse. And it's a similar concept,
right? And you watch yourself do it, and it's almost laughable, right? Because every time you're like, okay, this helps. I'll do it for a minute, and then back in autopilot, right?
Yeah.
Like, oh well, that's solved.
It's really interesting because even if it happens over and over again, it's almost like you're just hoping that the it's not going to happen again for what, even though you know it's not, and even though you know that it will, it's just you're just hoping like, oh, maybe this time it'll be different. But and I think it's the same. The meditation is the example that I have as well, where um if I meditate every day, even just for like 2 or 3 minutes, like really short, I always feel better.
Mm.
My mindset is always better. But then when I feel really good, I'll start being like, oh, you know what? I'm doing all right. I won't bother with it anymore because I'm doing okay. And then I'll start to deteriorate, and then I'll pick it up again. And I do it every time. It's like this cycle of just like, George, what are you doing? And it's one of the main things that I got from your book is that like you kind of explain it in a more in-depth way, but like you're saying is, converting it into something that's positive, and making it, even though the word discipline has this kind of negative connotations with it, of it being like a forced thing, you
Mhm.
can have discipline and it be, enjoyable or positive.
Yeah, I mean, I can't believe I just said that word so many times, because even hearing it out of your mouth, I'm like, oh,
Yeah.
discipline. But yeah, I mean, a lot of times what you need to do is just do that cycle so many times. You just get so fed up with yourself. You've just had enough, and
Mm.
I don't think that's the best way to do it, but
It's
I think that's the way a lot of us do it.
it's interesting. It actually kind of reminds me of the when you mention in your book, like, make rock bottom now.
Mm,
Like that cyclical nature, because in the book you talk about how, rock bottom, there is no such thing. It's just you hit a point where you like, I've had enough of this.
yeah.
And then you start to get better. I think it's similar to that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, rock bottom's a choice. I used to find it because I heard stories about rock bottom.
Mm.
Oh, you hit rock bottom and you come up. So I kind of would hit rock bottom and be like, I think I could go lower. And sure enough, I did. And then I'm like, wow, well, I want to make sure I'm at rock bottom so I don't do it again. And then next thing you know, you're like, okay, it's clear. The only rock bottom is actually death. So, like, this is what I'm calling rock bottom. I'm not going any lower. Let's start taking the steps and stick with the practice.
And so, a bit of kind of knowledge about me is I've with my dad,
Mm,
I worked with a lot of kind of like alcoholics, and with like Alcoholics Anonymous and things like
yeah.
that. And a big thing that you often hear about alcoholics, and just any kind of addiction, is that they have to reach a low point to then want
Mm,
to get the help. But they have to hit that rock bottom. And
yeah,
I think it's the same with everything in life. I'm kind of a believer that we all have our own addictions to something. Um,
absolutely.
and and yeah, it is just that point of like hitting that, what, I've had enough of this, like, I don't want this anymore, so I'm going to put these things in place, and getting to that point where you're like, you need that, not just half-heartedly, and not just thinking, oh, I'll probably be all right. You're actually like, you know what, I'm at rock bottom, I need to sort it out. And it's just like you say, getting to that point, making this moment now, that's it. And then
Yeah. And tying back around to journaling as well, it's so important that we log those times because we forget. I personally am a cynical optimist. I've been called. I always have hope, but what happens is I end up forgetting stuff. So by
mm,
journaling in those times, I can go back and remember how bad it was, how I felt, and that often is enough inspiration to kind of keep that practice going. If you wrote about your hips, maybe for me with squats, it was my low back, not my hips. But same thing, I never did enough work to get to the point where I could really do that. But setting up little reminders that keep us on track is one little tool on how to, like,
mm.
whatever you need to say to yourself, little sign on your mirror in the morning is stretch, George. you know
Yeah.
Mike, for me it's Mike, don't be an idiot, like, do the work.
No, yeah, and it's important, isn't it? It's kind of going into your own psyche, and not making it it's almost like, when you do a hobby, but then all of a sudden it's work, and then all of a sudden you don't enjoy it as much, just because in
Mm,
your head now it's work. It's stopping that. It's making the decision not to make this work, not to make it something bad. Like, focus on, like, oh, look how great I feel when I meditate, or look how good my hips feel when I stretch.
yeah,
It's really
yeah.
important. And so, just to kind of, before we wrap up, as you know, and we've been speaking about, my mind's work specifically in kind of the exercising community, and we spoke quite a lot about exercise in this interview. I'm just kind of interested in, you mentioned exercise in the book, kind of, here, there, and everywhere. There's little bits. What exercises do you do, or what exercise do you do, or what exercise have you done in the past to help with your mental health?
The first thing that comes to mind is running in the forest. And for me, that was often not even a choice. This probably happened in my teens, but I would be in these really low points and I would just run. And I happened to live up against, a lot of forests and trails, and I would just be able to go out there and run, sometimes crying, sometimes not, sometimes, that sadness would turn into anger and this fuel, and I would just push and push and push. Exercise, I mean, that oftentimes felt amazing just because it would get endorphins going, get blood flow, or be so, historically, a lot of my push to exercise really hard came from a side that wasn't necessarily great, but I never wanted to hurt anybody else. I never wanted to, be destructive. So I found exercise to be this kind of helpful, this way to turn that energy into something that would make me a better person, make me stronger. So exercise historically kind of saved my life a lot because I had something that could handle that much energy. I'm a little bit older now. I still keep fit, but I've had some injuries that have kept me out for a lot. And that's been really hard. I've noticed it a lot. It's really hard to only be able to like go for walks, when I'm dying to burn all this energy. It's like I have to walk, having all this energy and finding out how to use it, how to express it without having your normal output. That can be very insightful.
I think that's quite a common use of exercise for mental health. Is like it's a output for your stress or energy, worries, etc. It's something physical. You can put your stress into a physical thing. You can run until you're tired, or you can lift this weight. I think that's something a lot of people use it for.
Yeah, and it's a wonderful catharsis. It really gets. It's not it's a great fuel. It's not necessarily addressing where that fuel's coming from. Like for me growing up, I had a lot of anger and rage, which came from a sadness and this like not knowing stuff. I didn't know how to deal with it. So I ended up with this anger, and I used that as a fuel to work out. And it was an endless fuel because I wasn't actually addressing what was going on. Right? I wasn't actually looking in and being like, oh, I'm angry because of this and this and this, and I need to work on that. I almost didn't want to because it was this endless fuel where I had to become like this warrior. I had this idea in my teens that I needed to be this, warrior and just train and train. And it was great. I mean, it felt wonderful. It also got me really fit. And I'm not saying we shouldn't be fit, but what came to was when I started dealing with things, I found these much more, these reasons why and how, what being a warrior, because this is my personal path, I'm going to stay with it. What that looked like for me, what was important. Physical was definitely part of it, but it's also being a mental warrior, like being able to engage and address anything, like anything that comes at me, internal or external. Vulnerable or not, being able to address with that. But I don't want to get too far off the question. Being fit is so, or rather exercise and having a routine is helpful in so many ways. And one of them ties back to just the discipline. If you have a practice, and it doesn't matter if it's a good day or a bad day, that you just know that's part of your life, and you tap on, like for you, tacking on that 3 minutes or 2 minutes of hip stretching before your workout, it's a great reminder. Anything we have that's already set into our day, we can kind of tack things onto as a reminder and start to incorporate more and more tools that we're trying to bring into our life.
Exercise is a big part of kind of what I want to do with my minds is highlight the positives and the negatives, and kind of show how it can contribute to people's lives in a multifaceted way. There's lots of different things that can come from it, and a part of it for me, the way that it was negative for me was that, I used it initially for this idea of, like, you're kind of letting out this energy, and wanting to become something, wanting to
Mm,
become this, like, fit individual. But my kind of, the negative side of it for me was that it became that if I didn't do it, that's
mhm,
where there was a fear of that I become less than if I miss it, and that's where
mm,
my issues come. And I think that's where the issues with exercise can come, is it's based on your reasonings why you're exercising. So you could exercise twice a day every day, as long as your cycle, the reason you're doing it is healthy, and the reason you're doing it is a positive thing and is having a positive effect on your life. And obviously, you're looking after yourself and eating enough and all that extra stuff, but just kind of looking at it just in a very kind of narrow mindset. um but yeah, exercise, the issue is when it goes from positive reinforcer. So you're doing it because, oh, this feels great, I get all these nice feelings out of it, I'm making new friends, and this is wonderful, I want to keep exercising. But then if it flicks the switch and turns into a negative
mm,
reinforcer of, if I stop, if I ever miss a session, people are going to hate me, I'm not as good, bad things are going to happen. That's where the issue can come in. And yeah, I think it's a really important thing that people know, the ins and outs of how exercise can affect you. Not just, I know all these companies are trying to make money out of exercise and things, so they need to
mhm.
promote the positives, and it is really important. But I think it's really important that people understand the possible negatives that can come as well.
Absolutely. Yeah. And that's with anything. But yeah, and we do respond more to losing something than we do to gaining.
Mm,
As you mentioned, sometimes if you were to stop going to the gym, or say your body just hurts, we all have these big cycles. Sometimes you need a break. Sometimes you need a week off, not just an off day, but it's like, I really need to take a week off before I collapse and then get sick and have to take 2 or 3 weeks off.
mm,
So yeah, being able to honor that and doing that without feeling that we're going to the fear of loss, trusting that we'll come back to it is can be really important.
mm,
Sometimes we really have to step away to really come back fully. And I know you write poetry as well, and I have written a lot as well. And I used to go through phases where I didn't write, and I was part of writers groups, poetry groups, and people would be, when they got there, they'd be like, I'm terrified, like, I'm not writing. What do you do when you have writer's block? I'm like, it's not writer's block. I'm gestating. Like,
mm,
I've taken all this information in, and I'm not in a point to share and write it. I'm not at all worried about it. And then in a month or something, then I would just like pour out these words. But and a lot of people that I saw in these groups, they would not allow themselves to step far enough away to come back fully. They would always be holding and afraid that, like, well, if I don't keep writing, even though I don't want to write, I'm going to lose it.
mm,
But I'm like, no, let it go completely. You need to take a break from the gym, go 50 miles away from the gym. And then when you come back to the gym, show up,
mm,
but, and, it's not always the case. Sometimes we're just feeling lazy and mopey, and it's like, no, get your butt to the gym and work through it. And, part of the work is finding out that which one we're doing. Are we
mm.
just being lazy, or do we actually need a little break?
And that's part of some of the tools that you use you talk about in your book can help you with that. I think I've actually got the quote written here: is the key to understanding yourself is to make some things, some of what is currently unconscious conscious. So that's part of what it is, isn't it? There's so much in our minds that is unconscious. I think one of the things that I talk to people about a lot. Oh my words! One of the things that I
I
talk to
know.
people about a lot is the fact that, because it's in our brain and because it's our mind, we presume that we should just know it. And because of that, we don't allow ourselves to explore it. And people feel it's so strange to, to sit and, meditation has this weird, air around it, because people think it's strange to look in yourself, because like, why bother? Like, it's my mind, I get it, like it's my
Yeah,
head, but there's so much in there, it's infinite. Like, the amount of things you can think about is literally infinite. There's so
it's
much
wild.
unexplored territory, and it's really important
Yeah.
that you get in there.
And that's just the thinking side. There's also the whole feeling side.
Mm.
There's a quote from this author I used to love a lot, Julian James. The quote was, "Consciousness is like a flashlight looking around a dark room for something that doesn't have light shining upon it. Because wherever it looks, it will shine light. Its only logical conclusion is that the whole room is lit." So with our thinking, like what you were saying about this, it's our mind. Of course we know it. It's like, yeah, but it's that same thing. Like, we're only aware of what's currently in our line of sight,
Mm.
and how much is not. And sticking with that analogy, like the key really is to step outside of that role, to be able to see that whole thing. And meditation is only a part of what I do, and that whole mindfulness practice is only a part of it, but it is an important cornerstone. There's a lot of different ways to go about it, but be able to creating a little bit of space between our minds and ourselves. It's kind of for some going to be a really weird concept. It's like, well, I am my mind, but to be able to step out and be able to see that and see our absurdity, kind of like you with the stretching. It's like, yeah, well, I know I do it, I just keep doing it. It's like, that's a great first place to be. It's like, with my cycles and my absurdities, of which I have plenty, the first step is to be able to laugh at yourself and be able to see
Mm.
that and say, well, okay, great, now what?
One of the I watched a podcast. I listened to a podcast. I can't remember who it was, but I just remember the person talking about meditation, and they were saying how a lot of people struggle with meditation, and they say, I can't even do like 20 seconds. It does my head in, and I just don't think I should bother. But the
Mm,
fact that you've figured out that you can't think about and you can't meditate for 20 seconds is you've learned something.
yeah,
You've just spent 20 seconds learning that you can't spend 20 seconds.
right.
That's something you've learned instantly, and
Oh,
it's something you can work on.
God. Yeah. And sometimes that's terrifying. Like, to
Mm.
even face the fact that you can't shut up to yourself, that can be rough. And I get there too, especially if, I go through some anxiety or I got a lot of stress and I'm not sticking with the work. I know I'll sit down and be like, wow, I cannot shut up. I cannot stop. And then I look for a distraction. I'm like, well, I better clean the kitchen, or I better do this or do that. It's like, you just can't stop. So yeah, it's again, it's one of these indicators. It's one of these little check engine lights that goes on, that as you kind of tune in more, can be, oh, wow, well, I better. Like,
Mm.
I cannot stop myself from thinking right now. Okay, well, let's take a minute. And, just like exercise, the more you do it, the more you practice, the more quickly you can get to these places.
Mm.
If you're doing stuff every day, you don't need to spend an hour and a half warming up, which I'm mostly just walking. I'm kind of on a little break because of some injuries. So I
Mm.
need to warm up for an hour and a half. Like, I don't even get to where people who exercising or are doing it every day, it takes me that long just to like get into the body, because I'm not uh, super practiced with it at the moment,
Mm.
which
Mm.
sucks to even admit, but that's the truth of it.
Yeah, but we all kind of go through these phases, don't we? And it's just part of the life that we live, isn't it? You have these situations where things just can't be how you want them to be currently. But it's seeing the bigger picture, and seeing where you're going.
Yeah. 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 And I always see it as an opportunity to appreciate that which we haven't yet had a chance to put energy to.
Mm.
So for
Yeah.
me,
So
not being
yeah.
able to work out and exercise a lot, it's like, okay, well, I got all these other riches within me and these other things that now I can put a lot more energy into.
Yeah, it's an
And
opportunity. It's almost like a forced opportunity to open up that definition. And you know what? I can't do this now. So now I have to find some. And I think that's a positive that's come with the lockdown and the quarantine, you know, with gyms being closed and stuff. For a lot of people, is, you know, they've been forced not to be able to go to the gym. You know, and so I know a lot of people have been doing home workouts and stuff, but, you know, there's a lot of extra time that people have, you know, had to, you know, maybe fill with other stuff, or find a, you know, some kind of peace for an hour where you just don't do anything, which is a serious skill.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah,
yeah.
absolutely.
So I'm gonna kind of wrap things up now, because I don't want to make the interview too long. I don't want to keep you for too long. But thank you so much, Mike, for this conversation. Honestly, I feel like I could speak to you for like 4 or 5 hours straight, and we could just never shut up. So yeah, thank you so much. Can you kind of finish off here just by kind of letting people know where they can find you, either social media, websites, and also just kind of, yeah, wrap up by, you know, explaining a little bit more about your book or how people can get it.
Absolutely. Yeah. And it's been a pleasure being here. I enjoy talking to you, and I love what you're doing in the space with Myo Minds.
Thank you.
So yeah, Mike Dayem, I try to keep everything consistent. So MikeDayem.com is the website, and keep an eye out there. I'm going to be doing some programs as well coming up, and I'm sharing more and more there. Instagram as well, Mike Dayem. There's always information going out there. The book, Suicidal to Superhuman, is going to be available on Amazon. I believe by the time this gets put out, you'll be able to pick it up there. So both the print copy and the EPUB will be available. So grab a copy, share, read, let me know feedback. If it, you know, resonated with you, I'd love to hear about it, and just keep doing this work. And then I believe we're also doing a giveaway.
We are.
Minds.
I believe it's 3 of the online versions of the book, so the kind of, you know, the web versions. And we're going to be doing a giveaway on our Instagram, so everyone look out for that. We'll organize the logistics of it more close to the time, but I believe that I'm going to be announcing it on the 4th of September. So this will be going out on the 2nd of September. So everyone just, keep eyes on the Instagram for a couple of days from now.
Okay. Yeah, the book comes out September 10th is National Suicide Prevention Day, and I realize I'm speaking internationally, so take that with a grain of salt. But yeah, September here is kind of National Suicide Awareness Month. We picked September 10th as the date to go out, but it'll be available for pre-order before that on Amazon. And yeah, I look forward to continuing this work and reaching as many people as I can to help, you know, give the tools that I most needed.
Awesome. Well, thank you again. Everyone listening, thank you so much for listening. Like we said, look out for that. What's the word again? I'm losing my words today. Why am I losing my words? Look out for the giveaway. And thank you for listening one more time. And yeah, thank you, my minds.